Hello, everybody, and welcome to What is Truth, Part 95. My name is John Barnwell. I'm here in Detroit, the Motor City, and I'm here with Pastor David William Parry out of the city of London in merry old England. At least I like to think of it that way. And so we're here to continue on and our exploration of a subject that's daunting by any measure. And that being said, I wanted to open with a short quote from my favorite lecture cycle as of late. And some of you have been provided with PDFs of this, and it's also available on YouTube and on the archive, and there's links below so that you can avail yourself of a context of this statement. But it's on the ordeals of the soul, and it's in Lecture 8, The True Meaning of the Ordeals of the Soul, Progressive Gods and Backward Beings, the Mystery of Golgotha. Of course, the Mystery of Golgotha is in reference to the mission of Jesus Christ and earth evolution at the turning point of time. And this lecture cycle was given in this particular lecture on August 25th, 1911. It's Collected Works, Volume 129, was given in Munich. And it says, and I quote, "My frequent references to Greek mythology have not all been made with the object of interpreting it, but rather to throw the light which it affords upon certain pristine truths. Pictures, together with what we gather from history, are a better help in this respect than our abstract ideas, which are too impoverished to be able to bring to adequate expression the great wonders of the world. Then, too, in the figure of Dionysos, our attention was drawn to something which is associated with the deepest forces of our souls, with what we call challenges or ordeals of the soul. What then is meant by the expression ordeals of the soul? Ordeals are what come upon a man whenever he tries to enter upon the paths leading to the spiritual worlds. I made some reference yesterday to the lightest, the gentlest of them. In general, they consist of the experiences a man can have on his way into the higher worlds, experiences to which his soul is not equal without having undergone a certain preparation. The ordeal thus lies in the fact that a man has to make great efforts to endure certain pieces of knowledge, to meet calmly certain experiences." End quote. So, that shows that there's a considerable responsibility associated with the kinds of ideas that we tend to address here, or attempt to address. And in all humility, we just have to keep approaching this from different vantage points, because it doesn't lend itself to mere definitions, which pale in comparison to a beautiful watercolor or a symphony. Much better at describing our place in eternity, whatever that means. Pastor David, how are you doing today, sir?
Nice to see you as usual, John. Yeah, it was our service of worship, so I'm my exhausted first Sunday of the month self. Yeah, 95, isn't that a little achievement? I think we're doing quite well with it. I am very sorry that you didn't say the Straits, because I always get the chance to do my gag and pull the face. Merry Old England, yeah, I think that's Elizabethan. I mean, what's merry about England at the minute? A couple of months ago, they were, and I promise not to be political, a couple of months ago, the powers that be were joking about mandatory blackouts across the country after the Christmas period. Now they're saying prepare for it. I mean, is there no shame by these corporations? I know the answer. By these corporations making record profits, and ordinary people are now facing blackouts. Is Buckingham Palace going to be blacked out? Is Boris Johnson's place going to be blacked out? Enough's enough. The trouble is there's no fighting spirit. The Burgundian spirit appears to have gone. Nobody's interested at the minute in taking to the streets, and there was some terrifying, I mean, I've seen it coming over the last couple of years, terrifying footage on YouTube and TikTok the other day of young drunken lads being surprised at the new type of police vehicles driving past them, which are clearly militarized. It's not even like the gendarmerie in France. I mean, that's half military, half civil. I mean, these are clearly military vehicles. And that's the way merry old England is going at the moment. So it's hard to see what's merry about it. I wish I could. That doesn't mean there's nothing merry in the universe. It doesn't mean there's nothing merry and frivolous and wonderful in creation. I mean, people focus far too much on threats, not enough on the future. I mean, futurology, futurism has died out. I wish it would come back. Endless space movies where things actually evolved and progressed. I wish all that would come back. I mean, I'm not the friend of modernism, but that doesn't mean I'm its enemy. Certain things that were said back in those days were very important. And they're gone. They're gone. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about things. I know our services of worship must continue no matter what. We're under terrible financial constraints as usual, but we keep going. Yeah, okay, I suppose is the answer to that, John. Okay, fair to middling, as they say in this part of the world. How about yourself? Are you dealing with the great joys and vicissitudes of life at present?
Well, it becomes a challenge, an ordeal, in that how do we maintain that balance that is the rectification, really, of your worldview? How does one rectify one's worldview so that one can find equilibrium within a sea of uncertain and ill-defined circumstances and consequences? That's a challenge in and of itself. Just to be alive today is a challenge. And I don't see it as an accident. I see it as a culmination of the manner in which people have lived their lives leading up to today, that they have given themselves over to the golden calf in the largest sense of the word. And that is, they're making offerings to this material culture that they think is going to be their solace and comfort. And now they're coming to find that they might be ill-advised to take that path. And there's many people that are now reaching into their resources from oftentimes earlier in life, where they had some exposure to the, shall we say, biblical backstory of Western culture. And that's a big part of what's been lost, because it's been replaced by the faux religion of scientism. And I say faux religion because you'd be hard-pressed to look for verities or truths within the realm of science, because it's continually in a state of flux. As new discoveries are made, it changes. And so to say that you represent science is, if you're honest, all it means is you're representing acknowledging the fact that as far as you know at this time, this is what you think. That's a little bit tenuous. And hence what Rudolf Steiner says in this quotation, that he's making reference to that the images can be a better way to receive certain verities because you don't have the conceptual basis to wrap your head around it, really. And not meaning you, but actually meaning me. But the average individual hasn't spent any time learning what we have come to call the language of Christ. And if you get into it and you start looking, you get like approaches like this. Umberto Eco, search for the perfect language. Of course, it goes without saying, and there's the Tower of Babel, or Babel, as they like to say. And it's crumbling. And the Tower of Babel is very apropos. And by the way, just so you know, there's no mention of Rudolf Steiner or any of his students within the book. And so that's the world in which we're living. We're dealing with visions of the world from individuals that don't have a cosmology. And because they don't have a cosmology, they don't have a way to approach the concept of time that is in keeping with the metamorphosis of history that is a result of the changing circumstances of time and changing conditions in relation to the divine spiritual beings, which is what Rudolf Steiner brings to one's worldview, so to speak. And so that's a large part, of course, what we're trying to explore here as a quest for the Grail is what we keep making reference to. But what is a Grail? It's a container. It's something that can hold, it's a cup of wisdom. It's a cup of the heart. And so we have to sound these things out in our heart to seek out the verity, seek out the truth. And so that being said, that's why work done by people like good Pastor David in working with the mystery of the Eucharist, that symbolic gesture, you could write literally volumes and volumes and volumes on what the implications could be if you have the understanding to be able to present a multi-leveled approach of the Grail language. And so that being said, the key in understanding the workings of the realm of will within this creative impulse is gesture. You always talk about in alchemy, the gesture, that the finest, it was only the finest alchemists that had that proper gesture when they're preparing the elixir of life, because it has to do with that living process that brings about that ultimate transformation of the primum materium into that which can lead one to be a true reflection of the macrocosm. And so that is the challenge, just like when the great Grail researcher Walter Johannes Stein asked Rudolf Steiner about the alchemical book by Basil Valentine, The Triumphal Chariot of Antimony, about that book, what he thought of it. And he said that it was, in a way, a version of knowledge of higher worlds, but in an appropriate expression for that time. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. And if you go to the book, and it's a book on, alchemical experiments, and so you say, wow, that's like Rudolf Steiner's knowledge of higher worlds and its attainment, which was previously The Way of Initiation and its companion volume, Initiation and its Results. But you see, it's that whole idea of process, and to be able to work within a process, that is that apocalypticism, that which proceeds through stages. And so the best thing that one can do is to strive to be the beginner and to take up the task time and time again.
Right, forgive me for this remark. I loved your mafioso gesture. I thought a bit like Marlon Brando on the verge of threatening somebody. I rather like that. Oh, poor old Marlon Brando. You know what a huge talent. Whatever happened to you, fatso? Um, right, sort of from Colonel Kurtz to Superman's dad. What on earth went wrong? But that's not taking away anything from the legend, and a real legend, that's Marlon Brando, who understands art and culture and their significance, and is a great, great, great actor. So it wasn't a dig. It was just, will he ever live down being the Don in that particular family? I doubt it. Does anybody ever remember on the waterfront after that bloody movie? So when he was young and fit and lithe and so on, you could have been a contender, Rocky. Oh, you mentioned Umberto Eco, a man I admire no end because he's got a voluminous knowledge of semiotics and unlimited semiosis, which I find not all of this postmodern stuff is nonsense, as you know. I think that semiotics in literature, in literary theory, and unlimited semiosis are huge steps forward in understanding text and what it means and its relationship to other texts, meta text, global text, and all the rest of it. It leaps forward. I don't quite know how that came about. I've got to look into that at some point. But certainly the whole concept of right, so language is this ossified cream on the cake. It's the icing on the cake. But if you look at the different languages, that's exactly why we'll never find a universal communication. Look at the step beneath. Signs, marks, way before symbols, etchings. That's where you find the universal communication. And that certainly was something Umberto Eco was, I don't know, nearly rabid about, if that's not too much of a slight. Apparently you won't find Steiner in there or many of his followers for the simple reason I seem to recall Steiner lost his faith. I'm tired. Umberto Eco lost his faith while on a retreat. Sorry, doesn't that show it's working? Doesn't that show you're actually thinking about theology for the first time in your life and not actually sort of giving yourself sanitized fantasies about what religion is? The trouble is, most people think that's the end result, then they storm out thinking they've discovered some new plateau when it's just another step in a ladder which leads way beyond it. Right, Oswald Spengler, hang on. There will never be a universal language, however. Cream cheese frosting is definitely, I love cream cheese frosting, is definitely a universal icing for cakes. I love cream cheese frosting. Well, it depends what you mean by universal language. I mean, is language the symbol system of an identifiable ethnic group? If we're looking at truth, truth isn't simply a series, if you're looking at the academia, of philosophical designations and descriptions. It's not simply that. In a rational scheme of perception, your definition of truth must be rational, materialistic, and so on. Otherwise, it doesn't conform with all the other signifiers, as they call them. It simply it gets clunky. In other words, it doesn't work out. Whereas if you take the step back and look at what human beings were doing from the beginning, this will rile John. Derrida looks at it. I'm fond of old that Lothario Jacques Derrida as well. I think he's actually smarter in some ways than Umberto Eco, because of course, and he also realized atheism was a step in a process, and talks about God at the end of his career in a series of astonishing books on the indestructible. That is far too easily forgotten about Derrida, a genuine scholar in the classic sense, trying to understand the problem of reality as the ancients did, really grappling with it. Hats off to the man, incredible. with Umberto Eco, I mean, it's gesture. It's gesture. That's my trouble with him. So, right, you storm out of a retreat. You then become professor. I can't remember what it was, of aesthetics and something at a reasonably good Italian uni. Then you start telling us all why we've been wrong for the last 500 years. Sod off. You know, keep your personal phobias to yourself, mate. Love the name of the rose. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, right. Love the novels. Can we get clear of the rest? And even then, that annoyed me. Right, Christian Slater getting his rocks off is meant to be some wonderful moment of secularization. No, it's Christian Slater. So you know, God, what was it? 007 being the chief Franciscan. No, Sean, keep to Scottish stuff. Keep to Scottish stuff. And that weird character, the blind monk, who's floating up and down staircases. I mean, for God's sake, it is enough to put you off your tea. So that's Umberto Eco. Never. I admire what he did for the theory of semiotics, the practice of unlimited semiosis. I admire that no end. And I admire the man's ability, but you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. For me, he's really the Jordan Peterson of linguistics. You know, just sit down and shut up and stop making a career out of everything. You know, can other people get on with a decent discussion? Just keep out of it, Grandpa. You know, so that's Umberto Eco. Had he read Steiner? No, let's be even more cutting. Did he even know who Rudolf Steiner was? You know, it doesn't worry me in the least. Steiner's not there. I notice Smarty Pants Derrida notices he's there. He notices he's there. God, that guy, a Parisian bugger, never misses a trick. There was one, oh God, it was a sort of biographical movie that he wrote and starred in himself. Jordan Peterson wouldn't have the style to do that. So Derrida writes the movie, gives himself the starring part, and then you see him looking at himself on a TV, that's looking at himself on a TV, that's looking at him. Only the French would come up with something like that. Then you see him wandering down the Champs-Elysees with this flock, this shock of white hair picking up girls. I mean, you know, Umberto Eco, stuff it, mate. You're boring, right? Go and have another pasta meal. Leave us all to our own devices. Now, what else did you mention? No, I mean, there used to be something in medieval times called the Universitas Literarum, which one of my genuine heroes, Hermann Hesse, discusses sometimes in his novels. I mean, primarily he's a novelist. There are maybe misattributed writings to him of a philosophical nature. I personally think they are him, but that's a different thing. Certainly that comes up as a concept in the Glass Bead Game, the Nobel Prize-winning novel, excuse me, and one or like Damien, I think it comes up in that short novella as well. That the medievals were convinced you could have something like an occult Esperanto, where you all turn up in a room and stare at each other knowingly, and there's some sort of weird communication that goes on. I mean, can't see it myself. But you know, because they're looking in the wrong direction. They're looking at a super language which will somehow, you know, rise above all these primitive things called English and Italian and French. Are they really primitive? Are they really only the expressions of an ethnic group? I mean, if you have a language that makes an empire, and I'm not sticking up for empires. Anybody that knows me on this show knows I'm the enemy of empires, including the British Empire. As Gandhi said, all empires are satanic. I really believe that. But the point is, if we're looking at evidences of something any empire, including the Roman, might have done, which was beyond itself, it could be the spreading of a language whereby certain phonemes, certain tropes, certain core concepts are actually shared in a meaningful way between different ethnic groups. So the idea, which is a staggering thing to say, people think that's a small thing. That's actually a staggering thing. You know, I remember in those days when I used to teach English as a second language in the language schools, and sometimes you get black students who've been raised in the French system, and they were mostly horrified by what they heard on London buses. There was some guy, I can't remember, Francois, if you ever get to hear this, mon ami, you were a scholar. There was a young guy called Francois, I think he was from the Gambia, can't quite remember, who'd listened to this logical contradiction on the top of a London bus, came into my class fuming, saying under the French system, this would never happen. And he was right. They taught how to think, they taught how to reason. He was right. What can you say? But you know, the idea there is that core concepts and tropes can be extended beyond the ethnic group. If that is true, English proves it, Russian proves it, French proves it, Latin proves it, and so on. Russian, as I say, might be the best modern example. Arguably, I mean, English possibly primary, maybe Russian. Therefore, the idea of a universitas literarum, a universal literature, which would have linguistic patterns from the past within it, that might seem possible. It might seem achievable one day. But as I say, I'm rather interested in this other stuff whereby other people are saying it's already happened and we've missed the mark. We've literally missed what's going on. I mean, that's one of the reasons Derridian deconstruction started. What he wanted to do was look at what he called the archaeology of a language. You know, right, so let's take the word love, or let's take the word truth, since this is a show about truth. Now, let's sum up all the different definitions in French of the way the word truth is used. Let's spend a couple of pages, list them all. But hang on, right, so you've got this cluster of ideas, related ideas. They're not saying the same thing. So where did they come from? And you go back a step, and you go back a step, and you go back a step. People who haven't read his book, who haven't read his work, think it's nihilism, but that's always a sign of someone that hasn't read the books. If you have read the books, you realize he's being an honest scholar and trying to see where things originate, because words can be dated to villages, to time, sometimes to the year and the month where they were first coined, and how they were used from that first coinage. I mean, that is remarkable modern scholarship. So I suspect, this is a long-winded answer to that, John. I suspect that if you're looking at semiosis, you actually can achieve some sort of universal communication. And if that's possible and that's attainable, where do we go from there? Because if you look everywhere, is the answer, everywhere we want to. Because if you look at synthetic failures like Esperanto, that is really the only. And there have been other examples of these phony languages that you know, artificial developments of a language which were living. You know, English is a living language. There are living cultures that speak it and misuse it and argue about it and perfect it. All that's alive and organic and spirit. Oh, hang on. Oswald Spengler at John Barnwell. What does Mr. Parry think of Chomsky's linguistic work? Well, it's all sort of run of the mill, isn't it? I mean, he's a very good theoretician of ordinary linguistics. I mean, the academic stuff, I mean, it's nearly completely separate from his political activism anyway. I mean, he appears to have gone out of his way to keep them separate, which is fair enough. I read very traditional concepts at work, like gender flex, the way gender language is used, idealects, the way ideological concepts are used. I mean, it's all really bog standard stuff, which he's kept meticulously described. Wittgenstein wouldn't have been able to stomach it. I mean, he'd have thought, no, you're completely missing the point. And certainly, you know, Snake Hips Derrida would have just dismissed it as this sort of, you know, what on earth you're talking about, man. So, you know, it's like doing a basic qualification. You know, in Britain they're called O levels or GCSEs these days, right? So you've got your basic bit. What do you do now? I mean, that's Chomsky's linguistics, with the greatest respect to a solid scholar. Although I'm rambling today. Although I didn't like the way he treated Zizek. I did like the way. I mean, he writes him up as having no theory in the classic sense. Have you read Zizek? And I, you know, not being wicked, Naomi, but there's so much more to him than that. And also, oh, he had a go at oh god, the behaviour guy again. His name's completely gone. John, help me. The behaviour guy. Behaviorism.
Skinner.
Skinner. I mean, apparently when Skinner's first book first came out, you've got to see the funny side of people, and you've got to always try and see the good side. Chomsky's response was a 30-page demolition job on Skinner, which needed to be done. And apparently it shut him up for years. And it took the Skinnerians, about 2 years to rally round and think, the bugger, what's he just done? So that's funny and that's good. Nobody's all wicked. Nobody's all evil. I just think that, what is truth? Truth is the signs and the marks and the etchings of human consciousness as it ascends beyond itself, as it creates acts of transcendence, which some of us believe are not limited to this scheme of perception. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think like Chomsky's, he's an interesting case in point because, he's Polish and the people in Poland, by the way, they thought there were two Noam Chomskys because when he went to Poland, they said, oh, are you the political writer or the linguistics writer? So he has a large body of work and two separate followings, so to speak. And I don't go along with his politics, because there is no example of a successful collective state. There hasn't been one. And so given that it's been tried many times and it's never succeeded, that should be a leading indicator, as we say. But getting into the semiotics, it's interesting because in paleontology and in studies of Stone Age culture and so forth, there was an interesting observation made by this one scientist, researcher, and I wish I could think of her name, but I didn't know we were going to be going in this direction. But she made the point of that if you study the markings, the Paleolithic, the Stone Age markings in caves and places like that around the world that have been discovered, there's a reoccurring group of 35 symbols that are universal. And so it's pointing towards something universal. So in essence, you could say that that is the ultimate example of the universal language. Or you can go back to the comments that Madame Blavatsky made in the preface to The Secret Doctrine, where she explains the books of QT in Tibet that were originally written on palm leaves in a sacred language called Senzar, which is a Proto-Sanskrit language that she says was the universal language in the archaic periods. Now, getting into the stanzas of Dijon, which are derived from that, on which The Secret Doctrine is based, it's interesting because when Rudolf Steiner read The Secret Doctrine, he said, she because if anybody's read Blavatsky, it's really a kind of a confused but adventurous, phenomenal take on all things esoteric and trying to see how they compare from culture to culture and from modern times to ancient times. And nonetheless, she didn't really have very deep resources when it came to the esoteric tradition in the West, is one of her failings. But nonetheless, he said that, so he wasn't really, and I'm paraphrasing, he wasn't really keen on her commentaries, he says, but the stanzas of Dijon, on which The Secret Doctrine is based, are remarkable. And then there is described the sevenfold scheme of evolution that we return to so many times here when we were referring to the earth as being the fourth world. And so that is a very much to tell. Years ago, at the Mayflower, we published an edition called The Voice of Dijon, and it was just the stanzas with some of the commentary, some of the footnote commentary, just to make it a handy edition. And it's a fascinating study. But that being said, when you start getting into semiotics and linguistics, it just reminds me of Goethe's comment, because the philosophers tend to want to reduce everything down to mathematics, because that's, at this point, perhaps the most universal language that's being used in modern parlance. But Goethe says, mathematicians are a kind of Frenchmen. Whenever you say anything or talk to them, they translate it into their own language, and right away, it is something completely different. You asked me what I thought.
Yeah, I'm not being drawn about the French. I mean, Therese, what's her name? Liz, what's her name? Truss. I mean, she's just insulted the French. So I'm not joining in that sort of weird. Don't we have the Entente Cordiale? I'm not. The French are just the French. We have to live with it. There we are.
I love the French. They're a very high expression of the intellectual soul. You know,
and they do good food. And they do good food.
Yes, they do.
Oh gosh. I suspect you're looking at more. What was it you said? 35, 37? You're looking at slightly more than that primary etchings. They probably wouldn't be happy with the word symbol these days. But yeah, I mean, that.
But that's in the context of they've been found on every continent.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's slightly more. And that in itself is mind-blowing in a way most people wouldn't realize. Because that shows a commonality.
You have a lot of faith in most people.
I'm a pastor. I gotta have a lot of faith in most people. Yeah, but if people, I don't know why people aren't educated by wonder anymore, as Schopenhauer would have said. You know, the fact that there was a language before Babel, that proves it. Not that I'm saying there was a Tower of Babel incident. It's a symbolic story. If there was actually any history behind it, then God knows what it means. In the Middle East, they're called Bibel, Towers of Bibel, and they're everywhere. You know, you tend to see them on street corners. So I think oh my God, there's another Tower of Bibel, and they use them for storage. So not climbing up to heaven, they use them for storage. So yeah, I mean the whole Nimrod thing, and oh God, David Icke. Yeah, that was. I love David Icke. Probably because I wrote to him a couple of times, and he wrote back many years ago. And he lives on the Isle of Wight, and I went to school in Portsmouth. Probably there we are. What was it? The World's Biggest Secret. What a flagrantly arrogant title, right? And Queen Semiramis comes up all the way one third of the way through the book. Shut up, you know, right? So we're getting a story here about something or other. I mean, he clearly didn't know what Towers of Babel were or what the Tower of Babel was actually getting at, which is a shame. I mean, when he's good, he's very, very good. But when he's bad, he's horrid. He really is. I mean, he's doing well at the moment, going around talking about the attacks on food production. My Jesuit friends have been pointing out, they've been sending me all these documents flowing around America at the moment about shops mysteriously going out of business, plants, farms, big food producers that sort of should be prospering and thriving, that all of a sudden disappear. John?
Yeah, we have a large chain called Bed Bath and Beyond, and apparently the chief operating officer since 2020 somehow catapulted off of a skyscraper to his death in New York City. You know, so there's all kinds of, at this point can only call it high strangeness, because it's just the level at which these things are occurring. and the type of mindset that it takes to come up with these as viable approaches. Whether he jumped or was given a little help, who knows, but so that's the kind of thing that I was trying to approach at the beginning of this talk, is that between now and November especially, there's going to be a lot of things that happen that are going to be very much a shock to anybody. And without getting into any of the details, I think people know what I'm referring to, and I just keep pointing back to that there's no answers in the material world as far as solutions are concerned. And so it's on a level of soul and spirit that we have to meet these things. And so we have the good fortune of having things like do this in memory of me, as far as gracefully receiving our meals, and the Lord's Prayer, the only prayer that was created by Jesus Christ, as a legacy. And the whole doctrine of Christology is contained within that one complex prayer that even a simple child can approach. And so that to me is the greatest use of language, to have it pregnant with meaning, so that no matter how time unfolds, it still can serve as like a rudder to give one an orientation to meet the world and face these challenges without losing one's equilibrium between the Scylla and Charybdis, like in Homer. It's he has to pass between these two and maintain his equilibrium in his voyage. And so you have the challenge of doing that, and I'm just trying to help, and I hope I'm not making it more difficult for others in the process. But if you want to approach the realms of soul and spirit, Rudolf Steiner is very adamant that the divine spiritual beings do not like to be ignored, and that if society goes into chaos, that's somewhere in the background. That's your backstory, is that people are not looking to the divine spiritual world to solve these problems.
Oh, I mean, the irreligious dereliction of our religious duties is behind all of this. I agree with you 100%. And we will be punished accordingly, because that's what happens. Does the ultimate source of the universe punish anybody? That's a completely different question. But those higher powers that be will. I think we're looking at an incredibly rocky time. And not just in the lead up to Christmas. I think you're looking all over the winter and maybe beyond that. And the sort of things that people wouldn't have believed would have taken place before. As I say, I mentioned the militarization of the British police, which is kept quiet in the shires. They play it very, very carefully there, but in London is in your face now. And they're preparing for war. They're preparing for civil war or something close to it, which cannot be good. Food riots are on the way. I mean, yeah, David Icke, the current Dutch Prime Minister, what a very strange man, is attacking food production himself. He's not even bothering to disguise it. We've got to start thinking what is going on and why, and really we always end up with the same type of picture. Poorly. Oh, hang on. The Dutch are promised by Klaus Schwab to become the food. Oh my God. Oh, that's disgusting. For bug burgers. Oh, Paulie, how could you? Oh gosh, how horrible. Yeah, can Schwaber eat some? John, I think you want to say something there.
Well, it's problematic because actually the realms of insects, they're toxic. And so it's insane to say that people are going to convert their diet over to insects when you're talking about something that is foreign and toxic to the nutritional capacities of the human body. So, what's up with that? I mean, geez. I mean, and this is known. This is not an unknown. And you can look at just the frequent use of propylene glycol in all kinds of medication. What it's known how problematic that is for biological systems, but it's all over the place. So you have this scientism that's trying to impose on people this so-called worldview, and really what it is it's a micro narrative, really, because they want to narrow it down to something that's manageable for them. But what we're trying to do is develop our macro narrative so that we can come into relationship with realities rather than this taking and reducing things. Its whole idea of the reductionist viewpoint of materialism. They want to reduce everything down to the skeletal and see you can't understand a life system by just studying the laws that express in the skeleton. As amazing as the skeleton is, and if you look at the upper thigh bone, its structural strength regarding its form is absolutely phenomenal. It's beyond, the lattice work within it and just the angular composition and all of that. It's a perfection. And so you look at that and then you try and connect that to their concepts of that universe as something that was created randomly out of a big bang, and it's just ridiculous the more you look at the worldview. But yet, if you go to your high-level physicists and all of that, they're far more realistic and reticent about committing to these things, and most of your high-level physicists end up coming to the concept of the divine ideation, the God principle, even if they're only getting as far as being a deist, but that this whole idea that there is a divine idea behind creation, and that if we can align ourselves with that divine idea and take up our mission, which basically, as humble as that is, it's just to be who you are, but have reverence towards the great sacrifice that was made on your behalf so that you can have this arena of activity. And that Rudolf is very clear that from the divine spiritual world, we have a great gift that has been bestowed on us out of the substance of the higher spiritual beings that we have to nurture. And if we don't nurture it, by the end of Earth evolution, it will be removed. And we will be amongst those beings that don't have a spirit.
Certainly, I think our culture has forgotten the entire notion of periods of opportunity. Not everything is possible at every point. And that's a very dangerous concept to have lost. Also, I was talking a moment ago about high powers punishing. What I didn't mean was vengeful angels rushing through the sky with swords of fire. What I meant was the possibilities to react against the failing conditions that we ourselves have made fail. It means there's less room for these higher powers to maneuver. There's less freedom for them to do something to assist us because we blocked off certain avenues ourselves. I think it was in was it Vathek? That wonderful novel where an unclean spirit turns up at the court of Vathek and basically tricks the caliph into thinking that there's a great secret. And it ends up with Vathek going down into the pits of hell with his courtiers and those that still love him. There's a great play on those ideas. and they know when the clock will, I'm paraphrasing hugely to get to a wonderful short story, well, a novella. When they know the clock strikes 12, they will be part of the underworld too. And they're saying to each other, but at least we've still got each other. The clock strikes 12 and they leap away from each other in every direction to be lost in the great crowd beneath, because love is no longer a possibility for them, nor friendship, nor trust, nor loyalty, nor bonding, because those things belong to heaven, not to hell. We need more stories like that nowadays. I love neo-Gothic anyway, but we need a few home truth tellers. I mean, I like oh God, my brain. Christine, famous American writer, who bloody wrote that, and Carrie and all that sort of stuff. John, help me. Somebody put a link. Very famous American writer who wrote Carrie, and it was made into a movie. The telekinetic girl, played by Sissy Spacek. The only thing she ever did properly in terms of acting. Oh God, he's completely gone. I mean, we need someone of more substance than him. I rather like his work. He tells a good tale. Oh God, what's his name? He's really famous. Stephen King. Again, I like it. How does he write that much? You bugger! How do you write that much? Tell us. But I like the way he crafts his books. He was challenged once. I can't remember on which chat show. Forgive me. Some nasty, snarly interviewer said, "Well, are you Proust?" And he turned around and said, "No, he's not writing serious literature, but he can tell a good story." What a pro! I mean, that is a class answer. That's a classy answer. And they're good stories. They're lots of fun. My favourite, curiously, is the one that nobody ever reads, Thinner, which is a retelling of the Gypsy's Curse. And I loved it. He tells a good, honest, Gothic story. But he's not doing what the Vatheks of the world are doing. He's not giving the extra element of showing what the implications of something actually are. So let's take the example of Thinner. I mean, it begins with one of the rather overweight, I think it's one of the lawyers of a local Midwest community, can't quite remember, read it many, many years ago, who's being fiddled with, I think it's by his secretary as they're driving along the road. I hope everybody knows what I mean by that. I'm not getting more explicit. I'm sorry. And he runs over an old gypsy woman, as you do. And basically the whole thing goes to court. But hey, she's just an old gypsy, so she can sod off. And he gets off free of charge by the local magistrate. The local judge is his mate. And of course, her vengeful son turns up to administer the gypsy curse. And it's all rip roaring fun. It's great, and I loved every page. But you don't get reflections like this at the beginning. I think it's a Vathek again. Forgive me. Vathek is the arrogant new sultan. He's the new caliph. The old caliph has gone, and the kingdom was ruled by peace and harmony, and everybody had a share in a bit of everything. So basically, he was a good guy. Vathek comes along with his arrogance, and he wants to build the greatest temple. We're back to the Towers of Babel, the greatest temple in the world, the greatest mosque, although it's not openly said as a mosque. And the line suddenly goes, and Muhammad and all the jinn in the seventh heaven marvel at the total arrogance of this guy. They can't quite believe what they're seeing. And so for every story he has the slave caste make during the day, they had another one. And he thinks, my God, even the universe is now working for me, because he can't imagine being in the wrong. I mean, if ever there was a story for our time, it's that. It's Klaus Schwab building the mosque and thinking Muhammad and all the jinn approve when they just can't work out the depravity of what he's saying because they're good. It's It's something that is not what it appears to be. So Stephen King, love you, darling. Love all the movies. Love all the novels. Love Christine. Sexy cars. Love Christine. But write at depth, because we need someone of your talents to tell us all where we're going wrong. John.
Yeah, well, haven't heard that subject mentioned in a while. Yeah, Vatek, an Arabian Tale, or the History of Caliph Vatek. It's a Gothic novel that was written by a guy, interesting character, William Beckford. He was one of the wealthiest men in England at the time. And he had this fantastic collection of art and valuable curios in his residence that was actually formerly, I guess, a monastery that was seized during some of the more challenging periods in British history. But he wrote that story in French back in 1782, but it ultimately became published in English without his name in 1786. But it claims to be from an unpublished manuscript translated directly from Arabic in the French edition, which is an interesting literary device that he used. It's kind of shades of the Necronomicon, that this is, the testimony of the mad Arab. And we won't get into that. That's because that just falls down a dark chasm. But so you have this idea.
One comment: a dark, deeply racist cavern.
Yeah, the Necronomicon, the Book of Dead Names. But yeah, I had some run-ins with the guy that put that together. Actually, I've had run-ins with quite a few different people over the years. They tend to run into me more than I run into them, though. It's interesting. But so getting into this Vatic thing, it's when you get into the early literature of Gothic literatures, that's a truly remarkable example. And thanks for bringing that up. We're starting to get at the end of our little soiree in fun here, but I don't want to forget to mention the wonderful books of Pastor David William Parry, and because I know he had service today, and he's usually quite tired. But here we have his first book, The Grammar of Witchcraft, which is a Shakespearean study. It's not a grimoire, as I explained time and time again. His Shakespearean-esque poetry, Caliban's Redemption, and his major work, Mount Athos Inside Me, Essays on Religion, Swedenborg and the Arts, edited by the very talented Daniela Hadi-Irandust, and those are all available on Amazon, as is Daniela Hadi-Irandust's volume on Waldorf education, On the Philosophy of Education Towards an Anthroposophical View, which is a very interesting take on Waldorf education from somebody who's outside of the so-called system. It's being approached, actually coming from an understanding of a considerable number of the postmodernists and things that are contemporary. So it's a very interesting and penetrating study. And but those are all available, as I said, on Amazon. And I have two books. The first book has gone out of print. I'm in the process of working on reprinting it, so I guess I'll mention it even though it's not available. The Arcana of the Grail Angel, the Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order, as a forward by Douglas Gabriel, my good buddy and one of the principles of American intelligence media, and it's some 640 pages and includes a great many diagrams, many of which came directly from Ehrenford Pfeiffer, the founder of biodynamic gardening. And I reproduced the whole series in my second book, which is still available, and added a great many more. And I call them Grail Diagrams. And so you get a memory theater to understand the cosmological language of time and of space based upon the work of Rudolf Steiner. And so it's invaluable tools, and they're both available. Well, excuse me, the one that's in print still is available on eBay. You can buy it directly from me. It's considerably more expensive elsewhere. And soon, with the help of James and Marilyn over at the Rudolf Steiner organization, elib.org, he was the gentleman who assembled the Rudolf Steiner archive over the last 40 years. That's an amazing resource. It's been invaluable in creating this particular show. And but he's offered to help me. And what I think I'll have to do with it, though, is split it up into several volumes, because it's some 640 pages, but it'll be available on demand. And so I'm looking forward to that myself. But I also want to acknowledge the help that we've received in being able to keep moving this along. This podcast has been made possible by the generous support of Tyla, Vadim, Vivian, Tim, Neil, Christian, Mark, Maud, Drupman, Laura, Paula, Rick, Michael, Beth, Anil, Fred, Vistar, Anna, Russell, Mike, Ray, Whitney, and as I said, James and Marilyn. And for so many others over the years, thank you all for supporting our humble efforts. And now I pass it off to Pastor David Parry. He likes to usually share a comment or two and then lead us in a prayer to consecrate our efforts.
Well, certainly at Beckford, I was struggling for the name. Beckford is an extraordinary individual. There used to be extraordinary people here once. John.
I forgot one thing. If you want to buy us a cup of coffee, there's paypal.me/dparry777 and paypal.me/John Barnwell 888.
Which is appreciated by both of us. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame there isn't time, because I was going to get into Sir Edward Bulwer Lytton, who of course is an author of considerable force and power, of great skill, who's The Coming Race, which actually started as a novella. I think it grew beyond the idea, beyond the confines of a novella. I have to check that. Which was supposed to be Hitler's favorite book. About this subterranean ethnic group of super beings that are going to race out of the earth any second and give us a good seeing to. Yes, John.
Yeah, I had Gunther Vaxmuth was one of the young people that was around Rudolf Steiner, and he did a translation of The Coming Race into German, and I used to have a copy of that was signed by Gunther Vaxmuth, so that's kind of cool. But it's gone to a collector many good 40 years ago.
I see.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Bulwer Lytton, a lot of things that people have heard that are repeated so often, like they come from Bulwer Lytton, and the beginning of his stories and colloquial sayings. There's a great deal that is embedded in Western culture that is derivative from Bulwer Lytton, Lord Bulwer Lytton. I had a nice 10-volume leather-bound set of all of his novels at one time. Of course, that went by the wayside like an nice things. But anyways, back to you.
No, I know we suffer from the same types of problems. Oh, that's depressing. Yeah, we'll try and bring him up again next week. I think an extraordinary man of extraordinary talents. And that book says all sorts of things. A lot of things people think it says it doesn't say, and a lot of the things it does say people aren't aware of. So yeah, we're trying to explore some of that next week. My friends, all I'm going to do today is the Lord's Prayer. What greater prayer is there to do? For two reasons. I'm failing on my energy levels really quickly, and secondly, we said a very powerful version of it earlier. And it reminded me of the intense beauty of this gift to humankind, and also the great love that's behind that gift. So please bow your hearts for a minute and pray with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
Amen. Thank you, sir. And thanks, everybody, for showing up, and all the people that are going to hear this later on. Greetings to you too. And you all take care and have a beautiful day.